Hey everyone! Today we're diving deep into the life of one of the most fascinating and tragic figures in English history, Katherine Howard, the fifth wife of King Henry VIII. When people think of Henry's wives, they often remember the rhyme, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Well, Katherine falls squarely into that infamous beheaded category, but there's so much more to her story than scandal. Her life is about youth, beauty, charm, ambition, mistakes, and the deadly politics of the Tudor court. Being a young woman in Henry VIII's court was like walking a tightrope above a pit of vipers. One wrong move could cost you everything. Over the next minutes, we'll explore her early life, the people and events that shaped her, her rise to queenship, the dangerous court intrigues surrounding her, the scandal that led to her downfall, and the tragic end of her life. I promise this won't feel like a history lecture. We're going to look at Katherine as a real person with emotions, hopes, and fears, and see how the world she lived in left her with very little chance of survival. Katherine Howard was born around 1523 into a noble but financially struggling family. Her father, Lord Edmund Howard, came from a prestigious line, but he had little wealth and many debts, often leaving his children with relatives. Her mother, Joyce Culpeper, died while Katherine was still very young. This loss had a deep effect on her, and she was sent to live with her grandmother and later with various relatives. Some were caring, while others were strict, politically ambitious, or manipulative. Katherine grew up surrounded by a mix of privilege, expectation, and the dangers of courtly ambition. By her early teens, Katherine was already noted for her beauty, charm, and vivacious personality. She was outgoing, witty, and lively, a stark contrast to some of the more reserved young women at court. But she was also naive, a trait that would later prove fatal. Her adolescence was further complicated by her education. Noble girls were usually taught basic reading, household management, and religious instruction, but Katherine's schooling was inconsistent. Her greatest strengths were social. She could entertain, charm, and navigate small-scale court intrigue with ease, though she lacked the experience to anticipate the dangers of the royal court.
Katherine's family connections eventually landed her a position as lady-in-waiting in the household of the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, a woman of enormous influence. Here, Katherine was in the center of court life, surrounded by ambitious young women, gossip, and social maneuvering. It was also in this household that Katherine's earlier romantic entanglements took place. She reportedly had a relationship with Francis Derham, a young man of lower nobility, and flirted with several others. These may have seemed harmless in her youth, but the Tudor court kept a sharp eye on reputations, especially for women who might marry the king. Even before Henry noticed her, Katherine had already gained a reputation for her vivacity and charm. Men admired her, women envied her, and her laughter and energy made her unforgettable. Her natural charisma would prove irresistible to one of England's most powerful and volatile men.
By 1540, Henry VIII had already married 4 times, and the political and religious climate in England was tense. He was aging, unpredictable, and extremely sensitive to any perceived betrayal. But when he laid eyes on Katherine, he was reportedly captivated. Accounts say that Katherine's youth, energy, and beauty enchanted the king immediately. Within a few months, she transitioned from being a relatively obscure lady-in-waiting to Queen of England. Her rise was meteoric, but it was also dangerous. Henry's court was full of intrigue, jealousy, and politics. Every smile, every glance, every word was scrutinized. Catherine's charm drew attention, but it also painted a target on her back.
Once queen, Catherine was adored by the court for her vivacity. She brought youthful energy to the throne after Henry's tumultuous previous marriages. But the shadows of her past soon caught up with her. Her earlier relationship with Francis Derham became known to court officials. Letters, witnesses, and testimonies hinted at previous improprieties, and Henry's spies and allies began gathering evidence. In Tudor England, the king's perception of his queen's virtue was directly tied to the legitimacy of the dynasty. Catherine tried to continue her duties with grace, but she was constantly under observation. Her fear, confusion, and desperation likely grew daily, especially as the atmosphere at court shifted from adoration to suspicion.
By 1541, Catherine's past had become impossible to ignore. Investigations, led by Archbishop Thomas Cranmer and other officials, delved into her previous relationships. Witnesses testified against her, and letters resurfaced, painting a picture of romantic entanglements that Henry could not ignore. Catherine was arrested and confined, facing harsh interrogations. Imagine being a teenager, facing a king who could alter your fate with a single word. She tried to maintain her innocence, claiming that her past had been misunderstood or exaggerated. But in a court where loyalty, reputation, and obedience were law, her youth and charm could not save her. Within months, she was charged with treason and adultery, crimes that were political as much as personal. Catherine's trial was swift and brutal. The charges were serious: treason for adultery with men other than the king. Court documents suggest she remained composed, even brave during questioning. But the outcome was never in doubt. In February 1542, at the Tower of London, Catherine was executed. She was not yet 20 years old. Witnesses noted her courage and composure in the final moments, but the tragedy was complete. A young woman who had charmed a king and dazzled a court was cut down by the ruthless mechanisms of Tudor politics.
Katherine Howard's life is tragic, but it is also deeply human. She was young, ambitious, and naive, caught in a world that demanded perfection and cunning. She made mistakes, but she also faced forces far beyond her control. Her story reminds us that history is not just about kings and battles, it is about real people, emotions, and the harsh consequences of circumstance. Catherine's charm, mistakes, and untimely death make her story unforgettable. Even today, she fascinates historians and the public alike. She is a cautionary tale, a symbol of youthful ambition, and a stark reminder of the human cost of power and politics. Next time you think of Henry VIII's wives, remember Katherine Howard not just as the fifth wife, but as a young woman who lived, loved, and suffered in one of the most dangerous courts in history.